epic mind and body trip. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report is by Xozarie off Earwood. When this happened, 2008. The drugs used, DOI and cannabis. The dose, preferably 2 milligrams. The route of administration was through a blotter. Gender, male. Weight, 100 kilograms. And prior experience, he's had plenty of prior DOI experience and LSD. So this report is a overview of Xozarie's experience with DOI. And specifically, he does list a lot of the common effects that one would find on DOI, and he commonly would use it with cannabis, so we get to see more so here how the two go together. But let's waste no time. I know you guys are going to like this one, and without further ado, let's dive right into it. This report documents my experience with the drug DOI. I have consumed the drug several times now, at least enough times to not remember how many times exactly. The drug is said to be similar to LSD, the world standard in hallucinogenic drugs, although is reported to have a heavier body weight, which I think means that I can feel the presence of my body and internal organs and can feel my body's weight more than on other substances. I've consumed the drug in blotter paper form and noticed the same effects as I've read described online in my own personalized way. I'm going to describe what the drug does to me and how I ingest it, which means I won't be describing a specific trip. I prefer to take the drug early in the morning so that I can enjoy the early morning and the next night until early hours the next day. Yes, the 2 milligram dosage, in my case, a single square chewed up and swallowed, causes a wonderfully long trip, 20 to 30 hours. It comes in waves that diminish in size over time. I would typically set my alarm to about 3 a.m. the day before I want to trip, have an early night, and force myself to wake at the ridiculously early hour of the morning to ingest the tab. I would then get stoned and wait about 2 to 5 hours for the drug's effects to be noticeable. I can also go back to sleep expecting to wake up, or I can set my alarm to wake me up when the drug is peaking. So from being unconscious, I wake to a world not as I knew it, actually highly entertaining and scary, but certainly fun. The first things I notice, after about 2 hours if I didn't go to sleep, are my thought loops become shorter and access to memory, stored information, and other thinking facilities are diminished, almost as though my memory centers have been shut down slightly. This feels like I'm floating through space. Although my capacity to remember things and to recall them is diminished, I will still find the trip memorable and will still say, do, and think things using different parts of my brain that I didn't know existed while on the drug. I find that the hallucinations don't start until about 5 hours into the trip or not at all, but the drug is an amazing visionary aid. I enjoy closing my eyes and trying to visualize things. Mainly, I will just feel as though I am out of my body, observing the world in a new way. The next thing I will notice is that my insides are accompanied by feelings of nausea. I find this side effect a little disturbing. I can feel my intestines churning and my heart seems to be being pinched in my chest. I would say this drug causes some changes to happen in digestion, a slightly diminished appetite, and it possibly causes my heart to be overworked or my blood to be thickened. I'm not an expert at all on how this drug works, but it affects my brain, which in turn affects my body. The higher the dosage, the more difficult it is to control my body. I may urinate myself or defecate unexpectedly, although often a fear of this happening can ruin my trip. If at all possible, I try to regulate my dosage so I can still control my body and not have to worry about unexpected leaks. Learn to use the toilet while on the drug, because it can be difficult. I may experience an unwillingness to urinate while standing over or sitting on the toilet bowl. The trip seems to cause visual hallucinations, although mainly when I am trying to make them happen. This is good because it puts me in control, although bad if I want to be hallucinating properly. This drug is supposed to be hallucinogenic, but I don't find it to be, although I think the feelings inside my body are kind of a hallucination. I can experience discomfort and pain, maybe even difficulty with breathing, but it is merely a misinterpretation of my senses, particularly the ones I typically don't notice. Always, I tell myself to be calm, try to relax, and don't start clawing at my chest. The first time I took the drug, I ended up with an extremely painful rash on and around my left nipple, which totally ruined the last part of the trip since the pain was sort of magnified and caused me to claw even more urgently at the affected area. The drug's effects seem to be broken up into uneven waves. They may come every 10 to 40 minutes in varying degrees of intensity. The waves will cause me to breathe inaudibly. I will probably go, woo, or wow, every time this happens because it is an intense feeling. A feeling of nausea, which may actually cause me to vomit at higher dosages, and anxiety, hopefully accompanied by pleasant, euphoric feelings or hallucinations. After about 7 hours, the effects will be noticeably more intense or starting to diminish. The waves will be different and mainly less intense. Once I start feeling bored, if that happens, and if I don't start to get sick of the feeling, I smoke some weed. The trip will become almost psychotic in nature. My thoughts will spiral out of control. Closed-eye hallucination and visual static will be prevalent, and the waves will be accompanied by weed hallucinations, which are both wonderful and horrible. After the 12-hour mark, I can expect the trip to continue for another 10 or more hours, and then I can probably sleep the rest of the trip off. As with other synthetic amphetamines, I will find it hard to sleep, as much as my body seems to crave it. Trying to clear my head and feel hypnotized, I lay as still as possible since the DOI will be trying to make me writhe around in my bed, which will keep me awake. When I do finally sleep, I may have some interesting dreams or merely wake up the next day or in a few hours feeling that the drug has worn off. I think that sleep deprivation intensifies the drug's effects, and once I sleep, that turns off most of the effects and turns my brain back around to normal. I'm not sure how it works, but that is what I found. I try to stay awake for the whole trip, using weed to make it more interesting. I haven't experimented with higher doses yet, since I don't want to lose too much control of my body and end up urinating myself or worse. In conclusion, I would say this drug is very interesting. I like the way it comes in waves and the fact that weed can be used to intensify both the weed's and the DOI's effects, but it is possibly a very dangerous drug, so be careful. So this is a nice detailed retrospective report of what the DOI experience is like, and with cannabis. I'd say Xozarie got the basics down of what DOI is, but if you still aren't sure, let's break it down a little. It is a psychedelic amphetamine, basically an experience where you get stimmed up while tripping. Like he said, it is comparable to acid, though tends to be more visual and generally heavier on the body because it is technically an amphetamine. And what Xozarie reported is pretty typical of what a common DOI trip is like. He gives good insights into many things like the physical effects, especially with the mention of nausea, urinating, and possible uncontrolled bowels. Also, I think he gives a good overview of what the mindset and the hallucinations can be like depending on what part of the trip. But at the same time, I do think it is subjective and it will vary depending upon the user. Speaking of which, let's bring up some past trips we covered and see how they compare. First, let's bring up How Not to Trip by Blizzard, who had a 3.2 milligram dosage and also reported feeling nauseous, and he also threw up a few times. Part of this was set on by the trip itself, but I have no doubt the appetite suppression and physical unease from the amphetamine part contributes to this. What differs though is the effects from cannabis the users experience. Blizzard reports not feeling anything from it. I think this may be due to the stimulant effect, but I also think this depends on the user too and how they react to weed while on psychedelics. I would guess Xozarie is in the more susceptible end. We can bring up the trip Life Giver by Treatsman, where he too smoked cannabis during his 3 milligram DOI trip. In his trip, he notes he smoked weed to help him relax as the trip was trying to take hold, which he doesn't note smoking later into the trip, only near the beginning. He notes the visuals coming in strong, but he seemed to have a fair amount of control of himself and his mind. Normally, that's a commonality during the first half of a DOI trip. It's when you've been awake for a long time that the thought loops and possible paranoia may spring up, such as seen in the trip Serious Medicine or Poison by Raki, where he was up for over a day and thought the SWAT team may be breaking in. And there is a similarity found in Tons of Energy by Frank, where they too experience the drug in waves. I think this is common for the psychedelic experience, but with the extended length of DOI, it may be much more noticeable and pronounced, as you may receive a type of break. But I say this trip by Xozarie stands out differently from the other DOI experience we've covered in this, in that it's the first report mentioned of uncontrolled bowel movements, which I can see there being difficulties urinating, but it being uncontrolled is something unique. Also, he mentions that the visuals don't come in until about 5 hours. This may be due to the dosage, but other trips report that it comes on usually in about 3. Overall, I'd say this experience for the most part represents well some of the classical effects you can experience on DOI. And with that, I'm going to end it off there. If you guys want to see more DOI or any of the DOX substances or any substance at all, let me know below and we'll get to that. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, hey, hit the subscribe button. If you didn't like the video, like the video. Comment something below. Follow the socials. It's been someone that's no one, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.